been working on this publication for some time now, along with our Asia-Pacific colleagues, and following very closely the developments of these three gentlemen in front of me, the global standard setters. And we hope that this will be useful for the community in our neck of the woods. Let's get on with the report. This is a follow-up from PwC's very well-received Sustainability Counts report that was first issued last year. This year's publication will be our second. Sustainability reporting standards are a critical part of our quest towards a more sustainable and low-carbon world. We are all familiar with the critical milestones, what I call the mid-year or final exams. For those with kids doing PSLE, you know exams are very important, right? And the exam milestones are, one is 2030, where we have to halve the emissions, and also 2050 as well. There is also another exam milestone, which is 2030, which is also the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'll come on to a little bit later. So transparency in reporting on companies' emissions and sustainability-related ambitions, targets, progress is critical to understand how far we have come and how much we have to go. Also very vital in these objectives for countries, financial markets, and other stakeholders are the fast-evolving space of sustainability reporting standards. As Marcus said, they are the guardrails. They're the guardrails to keep us on track. And later on, there's in terms of later on, we will talk a bit about tracks as well. Right? Train tracks, which Cynthia will talk about later. And these guardrails do look slightly different, they're not the same. It's important to understand what are the commonalities, the differences, and also how they will interoperate as well. So what are the main features of the report? The report is broken up into 4 areas. Later on, you will have access to the report, but in a nutshell, the report has a summary of the state of global reporting standards and frameworks. Later, I think Patrick will also share, and also Ilko and Hiroshi will share some of the standards which are coming up as well in the near future. But they, of course, include the CSRD, the ISSB, the SEC, GRI, TCFD, TNFD, and others as well. This is what my friend Esther Ahn calls the alphabet soup. And the second area is sustainability reporting regulations in Asia-Pacific. We work very closely with our Asia-Pacific colleagues to update on what are the latest developments in terms of jurisdictional type of sustainability reporting standards right now and to be enacted in the future as well for application. The third area is performance against sustainability-related attributes, which we worked with a school here, National University of Singapore and US Business School, to come up with some of the latest developments in terms of where we are at, in terms of maturity of sustainability reporting. Last but not least, we want to make it real. So we interviewed our clients from China, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore to obtain insights on sustainability reporting and whether or not it is useful or what are the areas that could be improved. Some of the areas that they shared were, number one, interestingly, they said, I think it's important to use AI, right, in terms of trying to understand what are the contents or what are the issues in the sustainability report and also opportunities as well in progress. And how does that actually feed into rating agencies as well? For more mature types of topics like credit risk, right, I think that's the inputs and also the kind of performance in relation to the credit rating agencies is pretty much then mature. But how about for ESG rating agencies and that input from the sustainability reporting information as well? And I think all agree that the sustainability report is a useful way to communicate strategies and value. And last but not least, just now, I think the Canadian ex-minister was saying that TCFD is something which is very useful, and I think the interviewees as well said that TCFD is definitely a very useful framework as well to be applied, which of course will be included in several of the standards as well. Over here, just a snapshot about what it looks like, but I want to take your attention over here. And this is the state of adoption of different standards in Asia-Pacific. And Ilko, you'll be glad to know that for the GRI, the adoption of the top companies in Asia using GRI is high. Actually, it's the highest, right? Which is why GRI will always have a place in sustainability reporting in time to come. And the GRI adoption has actually increased from 75% in prior year to actually 81% in this year, or this year's report. SDG continues to be an important framework to analyze because it is about development. And that also continues to be highly used as well in this neck of the woods. As mentioned just now, and I think this is the anecdotal feeling that we're getting, is that corporates do find TCFD, understanding the climate risk, whether from a transition or physical perspective, to be useful. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And TCFD has increased. My colleague, Lip Kim Ping, who does climate, will be very happy, has increased from 36% to 57%. It is a big jump in Asia Pacific. And just to let you know, this is before the standards, for example, in Singapore, kicked in, right? So this is voluntary. And one of the last key things which I hope Hiroshi will speak about, which is the IIRC. I think the IIRC as a standard has maybe not been as well adopted, but I think maybe it's time for a comeback as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay. And so what are the insights that we've seen? Firstly, we do see that there are many countries in Asia who have actually set net zero targets. But in relation to corporates setting net zero targets and also setting SBTi targets, which are validated, this is very patchy. What does this actually mean? It's either that they are afraid to set net zero targets because of maybe the sentiment, or it could be also because it is early days as well. Or it could be that governments and perhaps corporates in Asia Pacific can talk more with each other as well. The next slide I want to share is that the identification of climate-related risk and opportunities. Now, just now I shared that we are doing better, and indeed here on the left-hand side of the graph, across Asia Pacific in most jurisdictions, we are doing pretty well. In Singapore also, very good. And if you look into one of the key pillars of the TCFD is to perform climate scenario analysis. And in this climate scenario analysis, we also find that many countries apply the climate scenario analysis as well, which is actually not so straightforward. It's quite difficult. But I think many companies have managed to do that, and also general increase in application of that as well. Now, this is the area where it is a little bit more patchy. Now that you've identified climate-related risk and opportunities, and also done your scenario analysis, the next step is really to respond to that via risk management and also informing strategy as well, and managing those climate risks. Unfortunately, this area can be improved. I don't think it's only in Asia Pacific that we are seeing this. I think generally, now that we have the information, is now, I think, appropriate to see how we can adapt to it, to respond to it as well, and to inform our strategies in the corporate world. And this is also a very important slide, and we talked a lot about this during the side discussions at Ecosperity as well. It's about Scope 3. Okay? Scope 1 and 2, no issues. I think we do very, very well in this. But Scope 3, we are not doing so well. And why is Scope 3 important? It is Scope 1 and 2 is someone else's Scope 3. So in order for us to really decarbonize not only ourselves, but also the ecosystem in the value chain, it is quite important to measure the Scope 3, understand where you're at, and decarbonize that. And this will really help in terms of the ecosystem, including enterprises, SMEs as well. Right? So Scope 3 is something that I hope we will discuss during the panel discussions with the standard setters, and how they will be encouraging this, or what kind of reliefs will be had, and their views on whether or not it is the right speed to be undertaken. Last but not least is assurance. And my colleague who heads up ESG assurance here, Moi Lee, I think is very concerned with the statistics. It is not doing so well as well. You can find that if you look at the IFAC report, and in the other parts of the world, assurance, including the extent of assurance, is much higher, or the confidence of assurance is much higher. Over here, it continues to be quite low, whether it is internal assurance, and I know there's some internal auditors here, or whether or not it is external assurance, and I know there are quite a number of external auditors here as well. And the reason why this is important is because investors and other stakeholders do place a value on this, right? So in our PwC Global Investor Survey 2022, 50% feel more confident about the sustainability disclosures when internal review is performed, and 75% when higher level of assurance is obtained, right? So I think it's good for our stakeholders and also investors to obtain assurance. And if we have time, I would love to quiz our standard setters as well about where they think assurance is headed. But before I end, I must not forget one person. This is the Professor Lawrence Loh from NUS Business School, which I collaborated with. He is not here with us today, but I told him to keep it short, 3 minutes of presentation, and he will just speak for 3 minutes before I sum up. Over to you, Professor Lawrence Loh.
My name is Lawrence Loh from the Center for Governance and Sustainability at NUS. We are most privileged to partner PwC led by Fang Yuling for this Asia-Pacific study on sustainability. I want to, first of all, offer a set of ideas why sustainability reporting is important. I think based on much of the research we do at our center, first of all, it's being sensitive to the market in terms of meeting expectations of investors, also consumers as well as regulators. And secondly, in terms of more effective engaging a broad spectrum of stakeholders, helping them to make decisions and helping them to move on with corporate social responsibility. And last, in here, there's a very important implication on the value of the business. I believe this is a very important proposition for businesses to engage in sustainability reporting. And of course, based on our joint study with PwC, several key findings come out as significant. First of all, in terms of, say, ESG targets, quite a large proportion of the entities in our study do target disclosure, although net zero disclosure is a bit much less. In terms of climate change risk and opportunity, it's also very healthy, but they need to actually incorporate into the overall risk management process. And for scopes of emission, 1 and 2 types of emissions are quite mature, but there's still room for improvement for scope 3. But despite the 3 set of more favorable findings, there are 2 particular set of findings that I think would demand, require more attention from businesses. First of all, is the use of external assurances. Less than half of all the large companies actually use this mode of verification to cater to much of the information they disclose. And also very, very importantly, we found that barely just over 1/3 of companies do sustainability training for their management, as well as, very importantly, the board of directors. And lastly, I believe after all our study, it's good to do some action. And what we propose is we need to be relentless and continue in our drive towards decarbonization and net zero. Secondly, on the social side, we need to, of course, continue our attention on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And last but not least, the old faithful corporate governance. Is good to always pay attention to the G part of ESG, because the E and the S part do not just come about on their own. Governance need to drive them, the environmental and the social part. So if you have questions, please feel free to contact us at the addresses below. Thank you very much.
You heard it from the professor himself. Just want to summarize, right, okay, from both of us, is that we've done quite well in terms of climate risk identification, in terms of the opportunity and risk, but we have to inform strategy and also inform risk management as well. Scope 1 and 2 is okay, but we really need to do better in Scope 3. Assurance also needs to do better, and at the same time, we need to continue to stretch our targets and stretch our ambitions as well, whilst maintaining trust and transparency also. So thank you very much, and thank you for listening.